The year is 2025, and the most important agreement in modern economic history just expired. If you are not paying attention, you are about to watch your savings, your paycheck, and your entire standard of living collapse in real time. For 50 years, every barrel of oil sold on Earth was priced in US dollars. Every country needed dollars to buy energy. This mechanism created artificial demand for American currency that made the United States the most powerful nation on Earth, even though we produce almost nothing and owe everyone everything. But that system just ended. And the media is not telling you, your politicians are not warning you. Why would they keep this from you? Because if the public understood what is actually happening, panic would accelerate the collapse. If you knew the truth, you would understand that the America you grew up in is already gone. The Petrodollar agreement dies in 2025, and the dollar's global dominance dies with it. While you are distracted by political theater, the smart money already moved. The elites are not holding dollars, they are in gold, farmland, and foreign assets. They understand what every empire that debased its currency learned the hard way. The money you are holding is only worth what other people believe it is worth. And that belief is breaking right now. This video is not a prediction. It is an autopsy. The Roman Denarius, the Spanish real, the British pound, every single one followed the same path of overextension, debt, and debasement. The dollar is no different. It is not exempt. It is just next in line. To understand the mechanics of this inevitable fall, we must look at the last time a global superpower lost its financial throne. Consider the British Empire. For a century, the pound sterling was as good as gold. It was the currency of global trade. But after 2 world wars and massive debt accumulation, the foundation rotted away. The tipping point arrived in 1956, during the Suez Crisis. Britain tried to project military power in Egypt to secure the Suez Canal. The United States, holding Britain's massive war debt, threatened to sell off their sterling bonds and crash the British currency if they did not withdraw. In that moment, Britain realized it was bankrupt. They withdrew their troops in humiliation, the pound collapsed, and the empire was effectively dissolved overnight. We are rapidly approaching our own Suez moment. It might happen in the Taiwan Strait, or the Middle East, or Eastern Europe. The trigger does not matter. What matters is the fragility of the financial structure underneath. To understand the severity of this collapse, we must go back to the moment the trap was set. Not in 2025, but in 1971, the story of your looming poverty did not begin yesterday. It began on August 15th, 1971. On that day, President Richard Nixon appeared on television and temporarily closed the gold window, effectively ending the direct convertibility of the US dollar to gold. Before this moment, foreign nations could exchange their surplus dollars for physical gold bars from the US Treasury. But as America spent recklessly on the Vietnam War and social programs, nations like France began demanding their gold back. They sent warships to New York Harbor to collect their bullion. Nixon knew the vaults were running empty. He had 2 choices: default on the promises or decouple the dollar from reality. He chose the latter. Overnight, the dollar transformed from a receipt for gold into a fiat currency backed by nothing but a promise. The Nixon administration knew this was a catastrophic problem. If the dollar was just paper, why would foreign central banks hold it? Why would the world trade in a currency with no intrinsic value? The solution was a stroke of geopolitical genius and tyranny. In 1974, Secretary of State Henry Kissinger struck a secret deal with the House of Saud. The terms were simple, brilliant, and evil. The United States agreed to provide military protection, weapons, and regime security to Saudi Arabia. In exchange, the Saudis agreed to price every single barrel of oil exclusively in US dollars. But there was a second hidden layer to this agreement known as petrodollar recycling. The Saudis were not just required to sell oil in dollars, they were required to take those billions of dollars in profits and immediately reinvest them into US Treasury bonds. In other words, we paid them for oil with printed paper, and they loaned that paper right back to the US government to fund our deficits. This circular financing scheme allowed America to build the most expensive military in history using money that technically did not exist, through OPEC. This deal extended to nearly every major oil-producing nation on Earth. This created a system of artificial demand unprecedented in history. If Japan needed energy, they first had to buy US dollars. If Germany wanted to fuel its factories, they needed dollars. This system gave the United States an economic superpower, which was the ability to export inflation. Because the world needed dollars to survive, the US could print unlimited amounts of money to fund wars and welfare states without facing immediate hyperinflation. We printed paper, bought real goods from the world, and the world held that paper in their central banks to pay for oil. We exported our inflation to them and imported their wealth to us. This phenomenon created what economists call the Triffin dilemma. To provide the world with reserve currency, the United States must run massive trade deficits to supply those dollars to the global market. Over time, these deficits guarantee that the issuing nation becomes the largest debtor on the planet. It is not a bug in the system. It is a feature. The system was designed to consume the host. We traded our industrial base and our middle class for the privilege of printing the world's money. Now, the bill is coming due. The petrodollar system was not just a trade agreement. It was the true foundation of American power, more critical than our nuclear arsenal. Control of the currency meant control of everything. But systems built on coercion have an expiration date. And after 50 years of subsidizing the American way of life, the world has decided to stop paying the bill. The foundation, laid in 1974, did not just crack. In 2023, it was quietly demolished. The end of American hegemony did not arrive with an explosion, but with a whisper. In 2023, Saudi Arabia quietly announced they would not renew the petrodollar agreement. It was not front-page news on CNN. It was not a breaking alert on your phone. But in the back rooms of central banks, the panic was immediate. To understand why the Saudis and the rest of the world turned against the dollar so suddenly, we must look at the catalyst event of 2022. When the conflict in Ukraine escalated, the United States and Europe made a fatal strategic error. They froze over $300 billion of Russia's sovereign foreign reserves held in Western banks. They weaponized the dollar. This sent a shockwave through the global south. Every nation, from Saudi Arabia to China to Brazil, looked at that event and realized a terrifying truth. If Washington dislikes your policies, your money is no longer your money. The dollar ceased to be a neutral reserve asset and became a political weapon. If you are the king of Saudi Arabia or the president of China, you cannot store your national savings in a currency that can be deleted with the push of a button by a politician in DC. The trust was shattered instantly. Consequently, Riyadh has officially pivoted. They have joined BRICS, the economic alliance specifically designed to challenge Western financial dominance. For the first time in 5 decades, the monopoly is broken. They are now accepting Chinese yuan for oil sales. They are discussing trade in Indian rupees. They are even developing a new payment system called Project M-Bridge, which uses blockchain technology to settle oil trades instantly between central banks, completely bypassing the US banking system and the SWIFT network. The mechanism of artificial demand that kept the dollar valuable is effectively dead. Look at the data, because it does not lie. In the year 2000, roughly 73% of global foreign exchange reserves were held in US dollars. By 2024, that number had collapsed to under 55%. In the slow-moving world of global finance, that is not a decline. It is a freefall. China has dumped over $300 billion in US treasuries since 2021. Russia has eliminated its dollar reserves entirely. Even our allies are quietly diversifying. The world is waking up to the mathematical reality that the emperor has no clothes. When the global demand for dollars disappears, the supply does not magically vanish. We have printed trillions of dollars that are currently circulating overseas. As long as they stayed abroad, we were safe. But now that the world is rejecting them, those dollars have only one place left to go. They are coming home. For 50 years, the United States pulled off the greatest magic trick in economic history. We exported our inflation. We printed trillions of dollars, exchanged them for real goods, cars from Japan, electronics from China, oil from the Middle East. And those countries held our paper. They had to hold it to participate in global trade. Those dollars sat harmlessly in foreign central bank vaults, locked away from the US domestic economy. This allowed Americans to enjoy a high standard of living while the government ran deficits that would bankrupt any other nation. But now that the world no longer needs dollars for oil, the dam is broken. Foreign nations are not just stopping their purchases, they are becoming net sellers. They are offloading US Treasury bonds at a pace we have not seen in generations. Here is the nightmare scenario. When trillions of exiled dollars lose their utility abroad, they have only one place to go. They flood back home. This triggers a brutal lesson in supply and demand. You will have a massive tsunami of currency chasing the exact same amount of goods and services within the US borders. The result is mathematical inevitability. We are not talking about the painful 8% inflation you experienced in 2022. That was merely a tremor. We are staring down the barrel of a currency collapse similar to the Weimar Republic in 1923 or Venezuela in 2018. But this time, it is not happening in a distant, unstable regime. It is happening in New York City, in Los Angeles, in the suburbs where you live. Imagine walking into a grocery store where the price of milk doubles between the time you enter and the time you check out. Imagine your 401k, which took decades to build, losing 50% of its purchasing power in 6 months. Almost everything you buy, electronics, clothing, medicine, is imported When the dollar's value evaporates against real assets, the price of those imports does not just rise. It explodes. The middle class will be wiped out not by taxes, but by the destruction of the currency itself. You might think the Federal Reserve has the tools to stop this. You might be remembering the 1980s, when Paul Volcker raised interest rates to 20% to crush inflation. But you are missing a critical variable. In 1980, the US debt to GDP ratio was around 30%. Today, it is over 120%. When Volcker raised rates, the government could afford the higher interest payments because the national debt was relatively small. Today, the math is impossible. If the Federal Reserve raised rates to even 10% to fight inflation, the interest payments on the $36 trillion debt would exceed the entire tax revenue of the United States government. We would default instantly. The Federal Reserve does not have the Volcker option anymore. They are disarmed. When you look at the balance sheet, you realize they are already in checkmate. Here is the part the government is terrified you will understand. The Federal Reserve, the entity tasked with saving the economy, is powerless. They are not waiting to act. They are paralyzed. We are currently sitting on over $36 trillion in national debt. This number is so large it has become abstract, but the math behind it is lethal. Interest payments on this debt are approaching $1 trillion per year. That is more than we spend on the military. The Federal Reserve is now trapped in a binary lose-lose scenario. Option A, they raise interest rates to fight the inflation caused by the returning dollars. If they do this, the interest payments on the national debt explode. The government becomes effectively insolvent, and the economy crashes into a depression. Option B, they lower rates and print money to pay the government's bills. This is called monetizing the debt. It saves the government from default, but it pours gasoline on the inflation fire, destroying the currency even faster. There is no third option. This is the debt spiral. It works like a tightening noose. To pay the debt, they print money. The printing causes inflation. Lenders demand higher interest rates to compensate for that inflation. Higher rates make the debt even more expensive. So, they must print more money to cover the difference. The cycle accelerates until the currency has zero value. The people in power know this. They know the math does not work. It is checkmate. The speeches you hear about a soft landing or controlling inflation are not economic strategies. They are psychological operations. They are designed to buy time. They need to keep the public calm while they figure out how to reset the system. But make no mistake, the engine has already seized, and while the bankers play their final, desperate moves in the shadows, the consequences are already spilling out of the spreadsheets and into the streets. We are moving from the abstract mathematics of the Federal Reserve to the concrete reality of your kitchen table. You do not need a PhD in economics to know the system is breaking. You just need to go to the supermarket. Since 2020, food prices have spiked by over 25%. Energy costs are volatile. Housing has become mathematically impossible for an entire generation to afford. Credit card debt has hit record highs as families borrow just to cover basic necessities. The media calls this transitory or blames it on supply chains. That is a lie. These are not isolated incidents. They are the classic terminal symptoms of a currency that is dying. This phenomenon is known in economics as the Cantillon effect. When new money is printed, it is not distributed equally. It goes to the government, banks, and large corporations first. They get to spend the money before prices rise. By the time that new money trickles down to your wages, prices have already skyrocketed. This is not just inflation. It is a hidden tax. It is a transfer of wealth from the working class to the political class. The system is designed to steal the value of your labor without you ever voting on it. When a reserve currency enters its death spiral, the first casualty is the middle class, but the second casualty is the social contract itself. History is crystal clear on this sequence. When money loses its value, society loses its order. We saw it in Venezuela, we saw it in Weimar Germany, and we are seeing the cracks form here. When people cannot afford food, they do not vote harder. They riot. When governments cannot pay their enforcers, the rule of law evaporates. This is the phase where the danger shifts from your bank account to your front door. And how will the government respond? Not with reform, but with force. As the crisis accelerates, expect the implementation of draconian capital controls. They will make it illegal to move your money across borders. They may limit cash withdrawals. They will freeze accounts under the guise of national security. This is not paranoia. It is the standard operating procedure for every failing regime in history. They lock the exits right before the building collapses. The chaos you see on the news is not random. It is the sound of the petrodollar system violently unwinding. And while the majority are paralyzed by fear, a select few are quietly preparing for the inevitable. This is the part of the dossier where the conspiracy theory becomes conspiracy fact. The ultimate indicator of a system collapse is not what the elites say on television. It is where they move their capital when they think no one is watching. And right now, the smart money is screaming exit. Consider Bill Gates. You know him as a tech mogul, yet he has quietly become the largest private owner of farmland in the United States. Why? He is not planting corn. He understands that when a fiat currency dies, paper assets become worthless, but productive land that generates food retains value forever. Look at Mark Zuckerberg. He is not building a new data center. He is building a $100 million survival compound in Hawaii, complete with self-sustaining energy and food sources. These billionaires have access to information that you do not. They are hedging against the very dollar-based system that made them rich. But the most damning evidence comes from the architects of the system itself, the central banks. Publicly, Federal Reserve officials and global bankers dismiss gold as a barbarous relic. Yet, in 2023 alone, global central banks purchased over 1,000 tons of physical gold, the highest amount in decades. Do not miss the irony here. The institutions that print the paper money are frantically trading that paper for hard assets. They know the debt is unsustainable. They know the bonds are trash. They are front-running the collapse, securing their own survival while telling you to keep your savings in a savings account that pays practically nothing. Look at Ray Dalio. Look at Warren Buffett diversifying into commodities. These are not doomsday preppers living in bunkers. These are the most sophisticated financial actors on the planet. They are voting with their wallets, and they are voting against the US dollar. The message is clear. They have already left the building. If you are still holding 100% of your net worth in dollars, you are the one holding the bag. So, with the dollar dying and the elites fleeing, we are left with one final question. What does the new world look like for the rest of us? So, what replaces the dollar? This is the most common question, and the answer is the most terrifying aspect of this entire dossier. Nothing replaces it. Not immediately. We are not transitioning from one reserve currency to another, as the world did from the British pound to the dollar. We are heading into a historical anomaly, a world without a king. The euro is a failed experiment held together by bureaucracy. The Chinese yuan is trapped inside an authoritarian capital prison that no free market trusts. Crypto is too volatile for nation-states to settle trade today. Instead, we enter the multipolar era. This is a period of extreme chaos, where global trade fragments into a messy web of bilateral agreements. You will see Russia selling oil to India for rupees, Brazil selling soy to China for yuan, nations returning to the primitive efficiency of barter, commodities for commodities, energy for food. In this trustless environment, value flees to the only things that cannot be printed, debased, or sanctioned by Washington. Hard assets, gold, silver, energy, and decentralized protocols like Bitcoin will not just be investments. They will be the only neutral collateral left. While paper currencies wage war against each other, physics and mathematics remain absolute. But do not expect the US government to go gently into this good night. As the dollar's influence abroad evaporates, the state will tighten its grip at home to prevent a total exit. This brings us to the final card in their deck, CBDCs, or central bank digital currencies. The Federal Reserve is already developing a digital dollar. Do not confuse this with cryptocurrency. It is the opposite. Crypto is freedom. CBDC is a digital cage. It is a programmable currency that allows the government to track every cent you spend, tax transactions in real time, and even freeze your ability to buy food if you are deemed non-compliant. They will link this money to your digital identity and your carbon footprint. They will sell it to you as convenience and safety during the coming crisis. They will claim it is necessary to distribute universal basic income when the jobs disappear. But in reality, it is the ultimate capital control mechanism, a digital wall designed to keep your dying dollars trapped within their system. The future is splitting in two: a decentralized economy of hard assets for the prepared, and a surveillance economy of digital tokens for the dependent. The history books are filled with the names of those who waited too long to choose a side. Do not let your name be added to that list. History does not lie. It is the only thing we can trust. The Roman Denarius was diluted until it was dust. The Spanish real was debased until it was worthless. The British pound ruled the waves until the debt sank it. And now, the US dollar. We are not witnessing a glitch in the system. We are witnessing the mathematical end of an empire's life cycle. The petrodollar has died. The foundation has cracked, and gravity is about to do the rest. The questions you need to ask yourself tonight are not about politics. They are about survival. When the music stops, and it is stopping right now, where will you be standing? Will you be clutching paper promises from a bankrupt government? Or will you be holding assets that have survived every collapse in human history? Do not wait for the government to save you. In a sinking ship, there are never enough lifeboats. The only person coming to save you is you. The answers to "what do I do next" are not hiding in the future. They are written in the past. And that is exactly where we will look in the next dossier. Prepare accordingly, because ready or not, here it comes.